Hey everyone, welcome back to the Disruption podcast. I'm Michelle. My pronouns are she, her.
And I'm Tracy. My pronouns are she, they.
And we're really glad you're with us today. We have yet another exciting conversation. I know everyone's probably a little bit overhearing me gush about how excited I am about the guests that we have on tap, but I promise you, this particular episode is by far a real treat. In our discussion today, that we've been looking forward to for some time, we're going to have an opportunity to dive deep into the impacts of incarceration on women specifically and look towards ways that our guest is using her authentic voice and her impactful story of disruption to advocate for those women, for their dignity, for decriminalization and decarceration. Really, it's a story of strength, of courage, and also of hope. And so we're really glad you're here with us. Now, I suppose without further ado, I should go ahead and introduce this esteemed guest who we're in conversation with today. Tracy and I are joined by the world changing and groundbreaking Dr. Topeka K. Sam. Her pronouns are her, she, for a reason, so please let that sink in. Dr. Sam is the CEO of The Loam and founder and president of Epic Financial, TKS Ventures LLC, and Faces and Voices Inc. She serves on the board of directors for the Marshall Project, Operation Restoration, Pure Legacee, and United Justice Coalition. She is also a strategic advisor for Responsible Business Initiative for Justice, or RBIJ, FRESH, a digital bank for justice impacted people, and HARP, the Health and Reentry Project, which is a part of the Council on Criminal Justice promoting healthcare for people upon reentry. But oh no, I am not done. Since her release from federal prison on May 5th, 2015, Dr. Sam has served as a 2015 Beyond the Bars Fellow and a 2016 Justice and Education Scholar, both from Columbia University, as well as a 2017 Soros Justice Advocacy Fellow, a 2018 Unlocked Futures Inaugural Cohort member, a 2018 Opportunity Agenda Communications Institute Fellow, and the director of the hashtag Dignity for Incarcerated Women campaign and a senior advisor for NYUJ. As if Dr. Sam's influence in our society and culture wasn't enough, it does not end there. She also has hosted the Topeka K Sam show on SiriusXM UrbanView Channel 126 for 3 years and is now developing scripted and unscripted series as an executive producer for TV and film, inspired by her fight to change the many problems that plague women in the context of female incarceration. Dr. Sam's impact is not only world changing and groundbreaking, but her good works are visible and her commitment is noticed. In 2020, the United Nations appointed Topeka as the Goodwill Ambassador for Social Justice, Incarceration Reform of the Global Festival of Creative Economy. In December 2020, Dr. Topeka Sam received a full presidential pardon for her dedication to helping women turn from a path of despair towards a path of redemption. Then, on May 5th, 2022, Google.org presented her with the first ever Social Impact Award at the Variety Magazine Lifetime TV Power of the Women Summit. And later that month, she also received her honorary doctorate in divinity from New York Theological Seminary. In all that she does, and in the ways her passion makes the world a better place, Dr. Sam works selflessly and relentlessly in her fight for the dignity, decriminalization, and decarceration of our women and our girls. Welcome, Dr. Sam. We are so thrilled to have this conversation with you and share your story and your mission with our fellow disruptors.
Thank
Woo!
you so much for having me. And what an introduction.
That's all you. That is all you. I just read it.
It's basically hashtag badass. All the way.
Oh,
All the
yes.
way. All the
I
way.
love
And
it.
I'm owning that,
I have chills. I don't know if
especially from
everybody
you,
else does, but I
Tracy.
have chills.
Oh, thank you. That's so great. I'm excited to be here. Love you, Tracy.
Oh, I
Thank
love you
you.
too. I'm so thankful that, we were able to connect and were brought together. I think it was, I was looking for somebody to help us improve our policies around people who had been incarcerated, and we'll get into the barriers that folks face when they come out. And, some of those barriers go all the way across from finding relationships and dating. And so, we, I think Jane Randall brought us together to work
Yes.
together on how we can improve policies. And you're my number one go-to now. I think I tell people that if you need somebody in this space, you are, and Loam is the organization to go to. And I feel really strongly about that. But it was an instant connection. The light within you is undeniable. The beauty of just that instant connection with you and knowing how much you deeply care about people is powerful, and you have such a powerful influence. And so, your organization is just really close to my heart. I don't know too many people who are doing what you're doing at the extent that you're doing for women who have been incarcerated. So that being said, I'm deeply grateful to know you and to have crossed paths with you and to be connected, because it's so important to make connections like this as women. So collectively we can create change and disrupt the world. So thank you for taking time to also help support me in my efforts, whether small or big.
Oh, no, thank you so much. As soon as I saw the announcement about your new podcast, I was like, I reached out to you. I said, I have to be on your show. Oh my gosh. One, congratulations. And I'm so proud of you and Michelle and all that you're doing. It's so important for women to see other women in these spaces, to have conversations that matter.
Yeah.
But two, also just the topics and things that you talk about, because, people don't really understand the journeys that people take in order to be, a disruptor.
Yeah.
And why it's so important. And many of the times, when you specifically look at incarceration as an experience, people look at people who've been incarcerated like, oh yeah, they should have been there. And if you did something, I looked at it the same way, you do the crime, you do the time, until you find yourself in that situation. And then you realize, wait a minute, all the people that are here, there could have been an alternative to how we handle this, as a culture and a country. But also 95% of everyone who's incarcerated will come home one day. And when people come home, how are we actually helping people to be healed and become whole, but also provide opportunities so they're not going back into those same cycles of abuse? And so just in your role and understanding that it was important to communicate with those of us who lived the experience, because we too deserve love, right? How are we creating those policies and opportunities for people, irrespective of where they come from, but how are we opening up a new pathway for people to be able to truly rebuild their life? So thank you for who you are and the light in you and the incredible work that you're doing. And shout out to Jane.
Shout out to Jane for
We
sure.
do love
For
us
the
some
dope
Jane, that's for
connection.
sure.
Yes, she connects me to all the dopest people always. So shout out there.
That's right. Sending her a big hug.
Yes.
Well, speaking of disruption, we always start this podcast with asking, the people who join us is, what does disruption mean to you? And how is that connected to your story?
So what disruption means to me is to radically interrupt the norm to incite change. And, for me, when I say radically interrupt the norm are systems of violence against women and girls. And whether that is, early childhood trauma, sexual abuse, intimate partner violence, the socioeconomic issues that we face as women. And just making sure that the basic human rights of women are met, which is access to safe and affordable housing, access to quality health care, access to equitable opportunities, and, food, healthy food. And so I didn't think about those things in my former life because fortunately, I was raised in a family, in a community where people were the haves and not the have-nots. And so, as a child growing up in, a really affluent community in Long Island, My parents being franchise business owners and restaurateurs, wanting to provide the things for myself and my brothers that they didn't have themselves. They decided to build their house from the ground up in a community where we were the only Black family there. And they felt that, hey, the American dream provides, you can have anything that anybody else wants as long as your money is green. And because they worked hard and they had green money, they decided they wanted us to be raised around all white people. So that's what it was. And while for me, these were my friends. Yeah, I always knew I was a Black girl, obviously, which is where Hershey comes from, like the chocolate. Go back.
Love it.
But these were my friends. I didn't understand anything about, a dynamic around issues with race. As children, my friends would say, why you don't like to get your hair wet in the pool? Or, those type of questions. But, I say, well, why did you want to get your hair wet? These are questions that you ask as children as you're trying to explore something different that you identify in a friend, but nothing that seemed to be driven from anything as it related to race. And so for me, it was always, as a child, I was very ambitious. And, I guess I was a disruptor always anyway, but I was like president of every club in school. I was president of the Spanish club. I didn't speak Spanish.
I
was captain of
the Spanish club in Topeka, and I didn't speak Spanish either.
See, disruption. Exactly.
I just don't know even what to say to either one of you about that. I really don't. I just want to give a shout out to all the Spanish club presidents who actually can speak Spanish. We see you and we recognize you.
Hola. Okay. Hola. I did.
There you go. There you go. Redemption. That's what that was.
That was good, Michelle. And it's, like captain of every team, but I did actually play every sport I was captain of the teams in. And, classically trained in piano and flute, all the things. So like I had everything. And when I got to college, I chose the HBCU, historically Black college university in Baltimore, Maryland, Morgan State University, which was very different than my upbringing. And so, while very happy, now I'm just another Black girl around other Black girls, but I was still different. People would say, oh, you talk like you're white, or you're pretty to be dark skinned. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm pretty, but what dark skin have to do with it? Like, I didn't even understand a thing. Right. And as you grow and you learn, obviously in retrospect, that I was really just trying to find a sense of connectedness and belonging within my own community. And so I began to assimilate the things that I was around. And that was when I started hanging out in the street. I was around guys who sold drugs and I started dating them. And I said, well, I thought I was smarter and I could do what they were doing better. And I saw how people, reverence drug dealers. And so I began to sell drugs. And while, again, I didn't know the impacts that drugs had on people or communities because I wasn't from there. My friends growing up, most of the time they drank, they had keg parties and things like that. And for the ones that did drugs, you weren't around them. You just didn't know because they weren't a part of your clique.
Yeah.
And so, as I kind of grew into this new lifestyle, and I still didn't understand because, I had money and, with money came power. And, as long as you have money, you have a lawyer and you don't get in trouble. And that's just how I saw things. So it wasn't until later on in my 30s where I had stopped selling drugs for many, many years. And I received a phone call out of the blue after 7 years, I think it was. And I thought, well, I was division chairperson for Amtrak for New York and DC at this time. I had one business and I wanted to open another business. And I said, well, if I do this one last run and I connect some people, I can get the money that I need in order to do the things that I want to do, and then I'm out. And it ended up being a federal drug sting operation. And I found myself arrested and thrown in a county jail.
Yeah.
And so I have more to tell about that story if you want to hear, but otherwise, that's where my disruption, I guess this part of my disruption journey starts.
It's like the next chapter of your disruption story, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
So yeah, when you found yourself, and I think it was in Richmond, Virginia, correct? Yeah. With no opportunity for bail, you're in jail in Richmond. You're surrounded by, all these women. You talk about how you began interviewing those other women. So what propelled you to want to dive into the stories of all these women? And then what did those stories, what did they do for you? And what did it spark in you? And what caused you to want to go deeper?
So what happened first, honestly, I started wanting to, I guess, begin or to communicate more with the sisters in the community because I was separated from everyone. I was a federal detainee in a county jail. And so they kept us separate. And so I was in a cell by myself for 21 to 23 hours a day. And the only way we were able out ourselves if we programmed, worked. And so I had a little job. I did that. I also was a teacher in a computer class. I went to religious class. And then there were these NA and AA meetings. And while I didn't struggle with substance misuse, I said, well, again, it was selfish, right? I want to get out the cell. Let me just sign up for anything that I could take. And so as I started going to these NA and AA classes, and I would just listen, sisters would stand up, hi, my name is such and such, and I'm an alcoholic. Or hi, my name is such and such, and I'm an addict. And I was like, at first, just very like, why are you calling yourself that? That's not who you are. Maybe that's what you did. I don't like it, not really understanding the culture or anything.
During the meetings already.
Right.
It's such positive disruption. I love that. That is not who you are. It's something you did.
Right. So I was, and then one day, because I had this idea that people use drugs because they wanted to. You say there's these campaigns that you see growing up, don't use drugs, just say no, drugs are bad. And, while I had been around a lot of drugs because I sold drugs, I never used. And so I asked one day to a girl who reminded me of one of my best friends growing up. I said, why did you use drugs? And I said that. Everyone says don't use drugs. And she was like, well, if you have to know. She was like, my father had been raping me and he gave me heroin for the first time and told me to take the heroin so the pain would go away. And then another sister said the only time I was able to spend time with my mom was when we smoked crack together. And it was all these stories. Yeah. And I remember I was just shocked. I began to cry and I broke down, like boo-hooing. And I started apologizing because I was like, wow, I didn't realize that I contributed to the harm of someone else. This whole time I'm thinking people had a choice. And I realized that that's not the case because that's the narrative that people tell people, right? And also the narrative that I created in order to justify my behavior. And so that is really what changed my life. And then I began to interview sisters and really began to build community with them. Because what I realized in my journey, I said, the last flight I had been on before I was arrested was a first class flight to Hawaii with my girlfriends for our annual girls trip. And the next flight I was on, I was handcuffed and shackled to a sister who had never been on a plane before. And while our journeys have been completely different, they still brought us to the same place. Yeah. And so we were more alike than different. It didn't matter, right? All of the great things that my parents had provided and opportunities in my life and the lack of the opportunities that this particular sister had, that we were still sitting next to each other, handcuffed and shackled on a plane to federal prison. And so it allowed me to begin to really see people as people and understand that while it's important for people to have these opportunities, important for people to be able to heal, that people in prisons aren't bad people. That, sometimes people make choices. Some choices are choices that people do because of survival. Some are others because people emotionally are struggling. Others are because they're, trying to feed an addiction. And others, like in my case, it was trying to find a sense of connectedness of belonging. But whatever those decisions are, we should not judge anyone because it can be anybody. Like I've seen all iterations of all types of people throughout my journey. So it was the stories, and it was the faces and the voices of those other people who were there with me that completely changed my life and allowed me to understand what it was that I needed to do.
Mm-hmm. That is, it's just so reaffirming to hear. And I think for so many, how powerful people's stories are when they choose to share them, and how it really can, it can really change your heart. And, I often say that you find your purpose in what breaks your heart. And it very much
Mm,
sounds like you found purpose in the hearts that were breaking around you, and the stories that you heard and how powerful they were. And so it's just, I think that's something that I think people need to hear, is that there's such power if we just stop and we listen to the story of that human being who's sitting across from us. And
that's so right.
and it really sparks change. It sparks connection, and it sparks change that the world needs. Um,
So true.
and this also led to you pleading guilty. Tell us how that led you to that decision, and what that decision meant to you.
Yeah. So, part of, for me, my healing, and my transition journey was being honest with myself, right? That while there had, I'm a survivor of sexual violence myself, and, intimate partner violence and all the things, that I also have perpetuated harm to others. And so, when you can get to a place to where you can say, wow, I wasn't as beautiful or as good of an individual during this particular time in my life. And that, as far as I'm concerned, in order to begin your redemption journey, you have to be honest. You have to accept responsibility, and you have to be accountable.
Mhm.
And so, also, I was raised in the church. So, in knowing who God is and knowing the way God wants you to treat your neighbors, that for me, in order for me to do what was right, it was to plead to what I did wrong. And so, while, I did not understand the way that the system works, in the way of how disproportionately, people of color and also women are
Mhm.
actually penalized in the system, I still knew that there was harm that I needed to be accountable for. And so I pled guilty because I was. I could have fought my case. And in the Fourth Circuit of Virginia, Eastern District of Richmond, Virginia, I was facing 20 years for a nonviolent drug conspiracy with no drugs.
Mm.
So in this particular case, I was convicted of 80 kilos of cocaine, because the conversation was to purchase 80 kilos to distribute.
Mhm.
However, there was never any drugs.
Mhm.
But conspiracy allows someone to say you were going to do a thing, and then the court can assess either based on the amount of drugs, what the sentencing guidelines would be for that, with mandatory minimums. People are looking at a minimum of 10 years or more, sometimes life, just because someone says something. And this is what I mean by disproportional impact.
Yeah.
So I didn't think I would be sentenced to 10 years or 20, because, yes, I'm taking responsibility. No, there were no drugs. We know this was jurisdictional entrapment. It was a sting operation from the federal government. All these things, I was brought into an ongoing investigation for other people who were actually caught and wanted to get less time. So that's how I got pulled in
Mhm.
to it. But I was guilty. Either way, with all of those things,
Mhm.
I had to say, well, Topeka, if you weren't there, you wouldn't have been caught up in this anyway, right? And so I did. And when I was sentenced, the judge ended up sentencing me to 10 years, 10 months.
Mhm.
And I went to federal prison the whole time, leaving my plea open so that I can come back for appeal.
Mhm.
And I always said I didn't think that I would do 10 years. I didn't think God would have me sitting in prison for 10 years. But there was something that I needed to learn throughout that journey, something else that I needed to see, which is why that judge didn't allow me out at that particular time. And so when I got to federal prison, what I learned was I was then incarcerated with women who were doctors, lawyers, senators, judges, come from, high socioeconomic backgrounds, high levels of education, but all had the same underlying issues, the same early childhood trauma, sexual trauma and violence, intimate partner violence, mental health issues, all the things. And then through that journey, it was going into different prisons in the federal system in different areas of the country, meeting sisters who were indigenous and learning about the stuff that was happening on reservations and the abuse that women face there and the substance misuse that really, really harms many Native people in their communities. Or methamphetamine. I didn't know what meth was, at the time, being where I was in Baltimore and then in New York. But in the Midwest, it was a drug that many people were using, and meeting girls who were, 20 who didn't have any teeth because from taking that drug, it ate all of their teeth out. Right. And learning about that and opioids and other things that, again, I understand now all of this part of my journey was to educate me and prepare me for the work that God needed me to do. And so when it was time, I was able to go back to court. My judge ended up cutting my sentence in half from 130 months to 65 months. I took a program that took a year off and a law changed. I got 15 additional months off my sentence. And then they told me I was going home in 2 weeks. And so when I got released, May 5th, 2015, I was originally supposed to be released September 30th, 2021. And I said, well, God, you got me out here. I know exactly what you told me to do. And I better do it because there's got to be a reason why you got me out here. Right. So I came home and I just hit the ground running.
Yeah.
And so that was, I knew, and I know I tell people all the time when I go back into prisons and I talk to people or helping people try to get themselves free after spending decades in prison, that, part of our journey is if you believe in spirit, your spirituality and your spirit journey, you believe about manifestation and all these things, that part of it is really seeing yourself for who you are in this moment. Yeah. And really understanding who you are born to be. Right. And when you're able to say, I don't like her, she's not too nice, or she wasn't cool, or she did not the best things, and accept that, because you don't need to tell anybody else that. You got to tell yourself that. And when I was able to share that about myself, and I was able to pray and I, ask God for forgiveness and then go through the journey of forgiving myself. I knew that I was forgiven. So it didn't matter for me what anybody said or felt about me. That when I came out here, I was going to utilize my voice and my story to educate the world on the things that I saw, and that I thought that there was an injustice happening, that this was a system norm that I needed to radically interrupt in order to begin to provide new opportunities and change what we're seeing around all violence that is happening toward women and girls.
That is such a powerful story, Topeka, and just so much beauty in the way that you use language, I think, to express your experience. And, and back to what you and Tracy were talking about and what you just said, part of my personal disruption journey has really been a focus on that language we use, right? The stories that we tell ourselves, the stories we tell about ourselves. And I can just feel it in my body that you are the person who can see right past the labels and past the perceptions of the individual that you're sitting with, holding space with, but that you can really see, right, the person. And so I'm really interested, hearing even just a few of the anecdotes that you've shared with regard to the stories that you heard from these other women. How do you hold those stories as you move forward? It seems to me that it's a great, it's kind of a great impetus for you, right? It's that push that keeps you going, right? Knowing the lived experiences and the impacts. But is it difficult? I mean, how does that feel as you move forward in your mission?
Oh my God, boy, is it difficult.
Right.
It is incredibly difficult because not only are you living in someone else's trauma each and every day, that you're also consistently in your own, right? Having
Mhm.
to share and relate to people so they can feel comfortable to share with you. It's incredibly difficult for people to show up authentically and to be their true self because of the fear, the shame, the guilt about how other people see them. And, I've had people who've even, applied to work for my organization who I would find out later that they had been just as impacted and they never told me in the interview. I'm like, you can tell me, out of all people, I didn't want you to think, what do you mean? Like, did you read up on me? Are you kidding me? But that people still hold that, right? Because they haven't gotten to a place of healing. And so while, I know that I have been prepared and called to do what I do, I know that it's not for everyone. No one wants to hear sad stories every day, but for me, it does two things. It does help me to understand that I'm right here where I'm supposed to be. It also keeps me safe. I mean, the truth of the matter is that when you have lived a particular lifestyle and done things a particular way, that it is easier to go back when things get difficult. That's why they have what they call recidivism, irrespective of what you've changed. Which is why they tell people you have to change people, places, and things in order to do, a new with your life. But when you are working within the system, for me, for example, I'm going to always be around people and places and things that are very reminiscent of from whence I come. But for me, what I hold on to is also from whence I've come, and I don't want to go back to prison. So it keeps me in a place of knowing that, and I'll just share another story that I shared recently when I was talking in a prison that I had went to Baltimore to do some work, and I went and stopped at a car wash that I used to go to years ago, and somebody I knew there, and they were like, "Oh my God, I'm so proud of you! I just saw you on Tamron Hall, et cetera, et cetera." And then all of a sudden they were like, "What's up? We back on?" So that means, are we back on, or are we gonna, we gonna get busy again, and we gonna start selling drugs again? What's up? You here? The connect is back. What's going on? And I was like, what? And so I'm like, no, I don't even know what you're talking about, and I quickly left. But when I pulled off, there were a few things that I had to even ask myself, right? One, why did you go there? So many car washes all over the place. And this was a rental. Did I really need to go to the place to get the rental car wash? No, right? So what was I doing and what was I going? What was reminiscent for me to make me feel a need to have to go back to some place that was familiar? Number one. Number two, the question I had to, or the answer that came from that was, no matter what people see you doing, people will still see you for who they see you.
Yeah.
So it didn't matter that this person knew that I had went to prison, that this person saw me come home and do a bunch of work, saw me on television and said they were proud. They still wanted to see if I was still engaged in whatever it was I was engaged in that would help to benefit them. And so that also allowed, I said, oh, this is what they mean about people, places, and things, right? Like, it doesn't matter how much you may have changed, that people who are still in that same place will continue to want to utilize you for what is best for them. And so, it's like all of these things when you begin to do your own self-work and understand about who you are, and that, yes, I'm a woman of God, and, I try to live my life in the best way that I believe God wants me to, but I also know that I'm human. And so because of that, I can't think that it might be that day of weakness if I put myself in a particular situation that I may not fall short again. You never know. But the reality is that I know that there's no perfect person. And so for me, it's to try to keep myself protected in that way, which is why for me, walking in the way that I'm walking, doing the work that I'm doing, allows me to always see where I've been, and to know that I also provide hope to so many people, because people who know my journey also can see themselves in me. So they can say, wow, well, I know I don't have to go back there. I know I can do something else because she did it, so I can. And so I keep myself accessible in that way to my community so that people don't feel lost, and they don't have anywhere to turn, because often that's what happens. People go away, their family's gone, maybe because they died, depending on the amount of time they've been in. You forget about people who are in prison, unfortunately. And then people come home and they don't have a community. They don't have a network. They don't have people that really understand. There's all these barriers, and you need just somebody to listen to. And so I'm grateful that I'm able to carry a lot of that weight on my shoulders, but it is incredibly hard, which is why I pray and I fast, and, I try to dump when I can, but I also try to hold what I need to and grieve, what it is that I'm feeling in order to release it when necessary. But it's work. It is a lot of work.
Yeah, well, it's impactful. And, another thing just to call out that you said so eloquently that we talk about often in our conversations is just how much representation matters, right? How much being able to see yourself in, in, to your point, that manifestation, right? Of your future self, your best self, your success. And so I just, I can't thank you enough for, the work that you do to hold that space and those stories as you move forward. I know it's so incredibly impactful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It is, and it's heavy. It is heavy work because it's dealing with heavy stuff. So, I think just also the importance of self-care, and just also knowing that we need to encircle people like you and others with support and love and care, because it is hard work doing the work that you do. So we're so grateful for that work that you do and fighting, on behalf of women in these spaces. I remember somebody asked me one time, does it always have to be a battle? And a lot of times it is. It is, and it's a tough battle. It's not an easy battle all the time. But I would I would love to hear your perspective, Topeka, on a couple of topics that are just central and core to that mission that you talk about, and that is these three big D's: decriminalization, decarceration, and dignity. Can you explain to us these topics and how they are connected to your fight for and behalf of women?
Yes, absolutely. So the first D, as in for me, is dignity, right? I think all people deserve dignity. And dignity is to be treated with respect and love and care and empathy and compassion and understanding. You may not have walked the same journey as an individual, but they are still a person, and in my belief system, one of God's children. And irrespective to what they have done that you may never have done, right? And while I've been to prison, there are things that people have been inside with me that, it took me aback when I heard while they were there. But what I also learned through that was that, what they say, hurt people hurt people. Yeah. And often that there are these cycles of abuse, and which lead people into, severe mental health issues because of severe trauma, and substance misuse, and which also goes into the whole decriminalization. When you are criminalizing people for poverty, when you're criminalizing people for substance misuse, when you're criminalizing people for harms that have already been caused to them, that when we know that sending people to prison is not going to change the outcome, not only for the community or for that individual, then we need to begin to start to think about how we no longer criminalizing people for poverty. An example, a sister was, really just struggling with her substance misuse. And so she couldn't keep a job, but then when you can't keep a job, you can't feed your children. And when she would get her food stamps, she needed her drugs or her medicine, right? Which is what she called it. And so she would take her food stamps, she would sell them to get money to purchase her medicine, because the health care that she had was not providing the things that she needed. the mental health treatment she could not get or sustain. A lot of the, even the network or the providers in the area were out of network, Medicaid network, so they wouldn't take within her community. And so she would be caught stealing. And a lot of times the things that she was stealing was not things that she could resell for drugs, even if it was though. But it was things that she would need to take care of her kids. She would steal diapers. She would steal formula. She would steal things like that and would be put in prison. Why are we going to continue to arrest her and put her in jail when we see what the problem is, right? Because who are you harming? You're harming the children, because every time she gets arrested, the kids are getting taken away. Now they're putting into a system that could potentially harm them. We know what happens in foster care and other systems. And then what happens to her? Yeah, she'll get dry, but she's not getting the treatment that she needs in order for her to be able to be whole. And so, you keep pushing people into these levels and not helping them. That's why decriminalization needs to happen, and then you talk about decarceration. We know all of our prison and jails in this country are overcrowded. The majority of people are in prison because they can't afford bail, or because based on their ethnicity, their race, their gender identity, whomever, could be why they're sitting in longer when they could be really out, with no bail and just waiting to go to court.
Yeah.
Yet we keep people in prison because we know that prison is big business. And so people, again, are going to come into community. If people are coming in community, you want community safer, you need to provide opportunities for people who are coming in community. And so when I say decriminalization and decarceration, let's start getting people out of prisons. Let's partner them with people like myself and other organizations who are helping to support people with the proper resources, opportunities in order for them to be able to first heal and then transform their lives. And then we don't have to worry about what we see in this country, which we don't see anywhere else in the world, right? Which is, pimping people for $1. And that's what the prison system does. You have slave labor. You have all of these systems. And then people come home, and after I've been stripped of my identity, which is where there's no dignity, I've been criminalized for my addiction and I get no support. And then I'm still being over incarcerated instead of decarcerated out of prison. And then I come home with nothing, no support, no resources, no job, doors are shut in my face, no housing. What am I going to do? The reality is, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And the reality is, why am I mad at a person that's stealing diapers for their baby when there's times I know, and I know all of us, right, are in a store and somebody may ask for some money. You may see somebody even holding a baby.
Yeah.
And you'll say no because they're going to use it for drugs. Well, why don't you buy the diapers? Why don't you, ask them, what do you need?
Yeah.
Instead of looking down on them, and these are the things that I learned through my journey, because I was the girl that just threw $1 at a person and said, I did my good deed today.
Yeah.
Literally. And so it's all of the things, if we really pay attention to, I believe, what the universe is trying to share and show us, and we really understand that we're not put on this earth for our own selfishness, but to serve, then we will see, that all people deserve opportunities and second chances.
Well, you're truly a public servant. And when you think about all this, the system is so broken, and there is also a disparate impact on people of color. Do you ever just look at it and say, you know what, this shit is too broken. It's too hard. It's too all these things. It is tiring. I'm exhausted, and I need to go. I tell people when I get in that place, I always say, I sometimes wish I just want to go rescue like desert turtles, because you just get in that, I'm going to get my pug bear and I'm just going to start rescuing desert turtles, because
everyone does their part in their own way, for sure.
And not that that's not a good, meaningful thing to do.
You're right.
I'm not putting down anybody who goes out rescuing desert turtles. I'm just saying I have those days where I just want to throw my hands up and, walk away. But it's kind of this inconvenient truth that I'm wired this way to keep going. But how do you what do you do? And what do you tell people and other champions out there like you who are out here trying to create change in the world? And you look at it and it's like, oh, you look around, it can be really overwhelming, particularly in the space that you're working, which is that criminal justice system, and the impact it has on people just like you. Do you
Yeah.
ever feel like that, Topeka? Do you ever feel like that? And what do you do?
Look, every damn day I feel like that. And I
Desert
don't say it
turtles on the regular.
look, and so nicely or eloquently, as you said, I just sort of, I'm like, this is fucked up. Like, I'm tired of this bullshit. Like, why do I always have to talk about my trauma to get a motherfucker to? I'm just like, I go in. I'm just like, do right. You know what you're supposed to do. Why I gotta tell you about what I went through for you to give the money to something that you know is the right thing to do? Like, it just, no, I go through this every day. And I cuss just like that. Let's be clear. There are dynamics to me. God knows my heart, though. God knows.
I know. I say fuck too when I'm thinking about it. So
You say fuck when you're not thinking about it too.
I say I'm a cussing Christian. Okay, God knows my heart.
Hey, we want everyone's authentic self here. This is your safe space.
But yes, I tell myself this every single day. It is hard. It is difficult, but right? And when I'm able to leave out my house and jump in my car and drive and go get something to eat or hang out with my friends or even just walk to the beach, that's a blessing. Where there are people who are living under a bridge or are going in the trash to get food. Or, and have to have their babies with them outside. I understand the blessings that, though I am angry, often, that it is, victimizing people over and over again, especially in the space that I work in. It is highly oppressive. People don't fund in this space in the way that they should. Right? You are directly affecting the lives of people and you're helping to reduce crime when you give to organizations that focus on ending poverty and incarceration. You are breaking generational curses. You are helping save lives of children and you're helping to shut down systems that we know that are perpetuating this violence. But people don't care. And that's just the bottom line. Yeah. And so you find those people that do care for whatever moment that they'll care for. They might care. This might be an issue that they care for a year. And I'm grateful. Next year they may not care about this issue and they might care about whales or turtles. Next year. And that's fine too. Do what you got to do. Yeah. But I'm laughing when you said that because today I was talking to someone on the phone and a funder of an organization, and she was saying, someone who used to work with her no longer works with her, and now she's out doing something with whales. And I mean, I found it was hysterical to me. And I just laughed so hard. And she's like, why are you laughing so hard? And I was like, well, first of all, the freedom to be able to say, I don't want to work in this anymore. I'm going to help whales, right? Like the freedom to be able to do that, but to also understand everyone doesn't have that freedom. Yeah. Right? Like we all just don't have it, even though we all have choices. We all don't I don't have the choice, even in all of the other things that I'm going to do in my life. My choices are not about helping whales. They can't be. Whatever it is that I decide to do has to be around helping people because I know that was my call. Hers might be to help the whales. It could be, and I hope that in her path and her journey, it is. And it will be fulfilling for her, right? Which is part of our climate and part of our world and all the great things. Yeah. However, I also think that, there are luxuries that some of us have, privileges that some of us have. And while I believe that I am a woman who has a lot of privilege and have had that since a child, I am still a woman, a Black woman, and a previously incarcerated Black woman. And those three, which people would call stripes, for me, I just utilize that to continue to empower me. to
Yeah.
continue to pave the way, to open doors, and to, take those hits on the back so that other sisters that come behind me don't have to.
I just have to say that again, back to, I think what Tracy would probably agree is my just incessant focus on language. I'm a language person. I'm a words girl. I just really have to highlight, I love your use of the term sisters. I think that's so beautiful. And it just encompasses so much about, who I hear you are and what your mission is and where you put your values. So speaking of the work that you do, right, this mission, this deep purpose that you have, tell us about your role with Loam as CEO and any of the other work that you do and any of the myriad organizations that I was able to highlight as I read your bio. Your very esteemed and lengthy, impressive bio.
Oh, thank you. Well, for me, my role at Blaze of Hope is the founder and CEO. Which, as everyone knows, encompasses really everything. I created this organization in prison. And when God gave me the name and what it was that I was going to do, I came out and I did just that. As I mentioned, how difficult it is to work in this space, but also to work in nonprofit, period. It has been really I've been thinking about how am I creating my life and my legacy. Legacy, we can define as many things. And I was also recently a part of a group called Highland Leaders, and it was a collective of Black women that were helping us to support us and think about what is our legacy. How are we creating our legacy, which was 7 generations behind us. And I hadn't thought about that. I did this work and I created the organization and I thought, well, wow, I have great impact. And I know the things that we're doing, that when I think about my personal family, I'd say the 7 little people, which are my nieces and nephews, my goddaughter, the other kids that I've adopted along the way, that I have nothing to leave them other than my life insurance. So please don't kill me. Policy, whatever. Whatever investments that I've been able to make, but I haven't been able to really create generational wealth. And that has been what I've been thinking about as I've been creating, other opportunities through for-profit ventures. And as I move into pivot into my next journey, part of my journey, that's what it has been for me. I know I am a servant leader. That's who I am. And yet I know that I can make money and still do good. And I've learned that. And I learned that I had to give myself permission. And I learned that it wasn't even that because of whence I come, why I wasn't. And I say that because of my prison experience and what they call sometimes survivor's guilt, and that you feel like you don't want to have more, do more than somebody else who doesn't have. But also what I know is to have more and do more, I'll be able to provide more to more people. And that's where I am in my life now, right? That while I've done this great thing, and people will always know, if I've ever written somewhere, that Dr. Topeka K. Sam, who once came from prison, did this incredible thing to end poverty of women and girls. And do I feel that I'm going to see poverty and incarceration ended during my lifetime? Doubt it. But I know that I've done everything that I can to at least plant a seed for it to help it to grow throughout the years, to empower women to understand that they can have more and that they are enough. But now, as I think about how am I creating the opportunities for my 7 generations, and how am I making sure that they have the things that they need and their kids have and their kids have, it's time for me to think about how am I moving and disrupting other systems in order to begin to provide that for my family. And it's been exciting because, I'm a person who likes challenges. I like to shift and pivot. I love new things. I'm an innovator anyway, but I love to do things that make sense. And so, while, I laugh often, I said, I sold drugs for a very long time, but I sat out here begging for money for a very long time in the nonprofit space to get people to give. I was like, but I can really do something impactful and make a lot of money and be able to then write $1 million check to my own organization, or to other organizations and people that I care about. Shit, if I wanted to write $1 million for whales, that I could do that. Or the turtles, who knows?
Turtles, right?
Right? But to be able to have that freedom, to be able to do something great and to give in a way that I know that matters is really what's important to me.
Mhm.
And so that's where I am now. And that's what I'm excited to be, doing moving forward. So it's all great stuff. So, when you create something and you see it grow, and then it's like, okay, what next? And some people sit in it and they feel like this is where I'm supposed to be for the rest of my life. But I know God has much more for me. So I've gotten to that great place that now it is that time.
I love you talking about giving yourself permission. That's another thing that we discuss often, right? Where there's, there's so much that's open in front of each one of us. And yet there still seems to be for some of us just that bit of barrier, right? That hump to get over. And oftentimes, much like I think the concept of representation, it's really impactful to have just that one voice, even, right? That one conversation that you can see yourself in, giving you then permission to, kind of go above, beyond, and get over that barrier. So I think that's really cool too.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's amazing. You create a lot of opportunities for people where there are barriers. And, how can people get help from Loam? How can they also help the organization? And, also, I also think about some of the most marginalized in our communities, like trans women of color. So many places they turn to, they can't get services, from shelters to a lot of the organizations that are supposed to be out there to help all people. How do you also, and how does Loam also serve the most marginalized in our communities?
Yeah. So, one, to your first question, if anyone goes to our website, the THELOHM.org, they can, get in contact through any of our programs. If they like to donate, they can donate there, or, get any information that they need through that. As it relates to all or women, trans women, women of color. I don't care if a woman is green, purple, blue, what race she is, as long as she identifies as a woman, she's welcome at LOHM. And we support all women. I mean, we've had trans women in our houses. Doesn't matter. I feel like you are my sister. You need support. We can provide it. That's it. Now we've had interesting situations, where we've had trans women who came in and, they've decided they wanted, maybe to transition back, which is great. But I'm like, look, now you're my brother and you can't be here anymore. So you got to go. But, we work with everyone where they're at. And it doesn't matter, for me, if you need your support and we can give it, then we will. If we don't, if there's something that we don't offer, or, a space that we don't have, we definitely work with other community partners that we know have viable resources and we know will support and won't turn a person away. And we do. And when we have women in our houses, like I said, everyone falls short. We provide safe spaces, beautiful spaces, and sober spaces. But at times people will fall short. We don't throw people out. We don't believe in that.
Yeah.
We work with people through where they are in their recovery journey. And we try to support them in the best way that we can. And if it is too much for them and they feel like, they want something else, then we find something that is as supportive for them in other places. So we invite any sister who needs support. Like I said, we have 7 programs. And not only do we support those sisters who are going through things themselves, but also sisters who have loved ones who are. Yeah. So you may be okay, but you may have a loved one who needs additional support. And so there's ways that we can help you in order to help them too. So, that was something that I learned again in my journey. When I first started, I wanted to support women who were like me, who were single, who didn't have children, who came home and just needed a hand so they can get on their feet. But I realized women like me didn't need me. Like, because I didn't need me, So it began to open my mind as to what else do we need to open to? How else do we need to provide opportunities? And when I started seeing those gaps for cis girls who are aging out of foster care, and trans sisters who needed additional support, that's when we opened up to be able to support everyone along the spectrum of sisterhood.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for creating spaces for everyone along the spectrum of sisterhood and welcoming all people. I think final question before we wrap up the podcast is, can you share some of the ways that you think that we and our listeners can lead change in this country around this particular issue? What can we do?
Well, what people can do is what you're doing. Opening opportunities, creating platforms for people to be able to use their voice to share the issues that are happening. So whether that is on your podcast, whether it's on your TV show, whether it's in your living room, whether it's at your dinner table, right? There are ways that you invite other people in your space in order to create those opportunities. When you think about the companies that you work for, how are you challenging people around diversity, equity, and inclusion? How are we including people with all lived experiences? Because everyone needs an opportunity. I mean, shit, God has given me 100 chances. So if it was only 2, I'd have been out of there. So I think, how are we providing these opportunities? Housing, right? Those people who own homes, who might rent rooms. Don't discriminate because a person from where they've been. Everyone needs another opportunity. Just because I might have been to prison does not mean that I don't know how to maintain bills, have good credit, create a home, and have a safe space. I think people should open that up and just stop being so biased. If a person has a loved one who's incarcerated, or justice impacted, I mean, there's 70 million people in this country with criminal convictions. 2.2 million people who are presently incarcerated in the prison system, and 4.6 million people who are incarcerated through probation, pretrial, and parole. And so talk to your loved one, talk to your neighbor, talk to your friend, reach out to them. If you haven't heard from them for a while, send a letter, send a magazine, send a picture. Like, people need to hear, we all need a human interaction. And when you think about what COVID has done to those of us who have been locked in our homes, think about what it was for people who were locked in a cell, in a prison, right? It was worse. Not only are they locked in a small place, but they weren't even able to have contact with their family. And so I think, there are so many other ways. Learn more about the issue. Talk to your elected officials. Donate your time. I say there's 3 T's, your time, your talent, and your tangibles, your money, right? Give into these spaces. So it's so many, but it's such a big beast.
Yeah.
You think that you can't do, but if more of us kind of, like bite at a little piece of it, the more that we're able to take it down. So, I thank both of you, Tracy and Michelle, for giving me the opportunity, because as you see, I could talk, to share about me and my journey and about all of the things. But, I love you both very much. God bless you and your platform and for what you're doing. And I'm excited to see where this journey takes you both as well.
Well, thank you. We love you too, and we support you and your mission. And you inspire me. I thank you so much for elevating, the voices of women, particularly those women who are impacted by unjust systems and institutions. And as women in these systems and institutions, we're all impacted at one level or another. But the most marginalized, the most impacted in society, you are raising their voices, you're providing opportunity for them. And that is very inspiring. And it's a wonderful gift and act of service that you are giving. And you're giving, a lot to these women and these communities by raising their voices. And I think you're exactly right. People, we really want to get that message out to disruptors and other people who have platforms and podcasts to elevate, women's voices and to elevate the most marginalized voices out there, because their stories and their voices are critical in creating social change in this world that we're all living in. So, thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your voice and, empowering and inspiring other disruptors who are just like you. And, and having days like we have when we're like, what the fuck? Desert turtles, here I come, but just love you and adore you. You really are just such a beautiful light, and you've done so much good in this world already. And you're, not stopping anytime soon. So
And dropping jewels on the Disruption podcast, I just would like to highlight the 3 T's for the 3 big Ds.
That's right.
Right? I heard that. I don't know if anybody else heard that, but I'm hearing time, talent, and tangibles going towards dignity, decriminalization, and decarceration. So
Love it.
That's right.
yeah, I love it too. And Dr. Sam, the esteemed Topeka, you've been such a pleasure to meet and to converse with, and to share in your story and in the stories of so many others, and really to highlight what we can all do in a sense of community, right, and sisterhood. It's been an incredible conversation for me, and I know our listeners will feel the same. We're going to be sure to put links to the loan website and kind of any of the other information and social platforms that you'd like us to link to in the show notes, so our fellow disruptors will be able to follow along with you and in your disruption journey. And just a little bit of housekeeping as we wrap up. To our fellow disruptors, we will be back in 2 weeks for another disruptive conversation that's sure to get your juices flowing. You can also find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. We'd certainly love to hear from you. You can tell us what we're doing well, what we can do better, and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts if you get a chance. That'd be great.
Yeah, and so what we do is we end with a call to action. So, Dr. Topeka Sam, you get to start off with what's your call to action for these disruptors before I wrap it up.
Okay, how many do I have?
No, just
as many as you want. Oh, sorry. Listen to Tracy. I would say as many as you want.
We'll stay as long as you want. Call them to action.
All right. Well, the 2, I'll give 2.
Okay.
1, actually, I'll give 3. So 1, I would say to make sure that you are following up and following with your loved ones, checking in on the mental health of people that you haven't talked to. And I'm not even talking about just people in prison, just, it could be your neighbor. It could be, your friend. It could be a coworker. Check in on people, because the strongest of us are the ones that go through the most silent battles. So that's number 1. Number 2, I would say give to the Ladies of Hope Ministries. I gave you 3 ways that you can give. So please check in with us, theLOHM.org. And it's also at the LOHM on all the social media platforms. You can follow us and see what we're doing and how you can give of your time, your talent, your treasure, or tangible. And lastly, make sure you are tuning into the Disruptor platform.
Oh,
this is a great podcast.
It's a good one.
Please make sure that you listen, share, and make sure that everyone is listening on how others have been disruptors and how you too can be one as well.
That's right.
Those are my 3.
I love that.
Do you mind if we clip that and use that, like maybe a little like marketing action? I don't know. It was
You
good.
got it.
It was real good.
You got it.
Well, the message
Yet another talent to add to the list.
The message of that is we're calling all of our disruptors, and that's why we're doing this, so we can assemble and we can convene to continue to disrupt. So this is the Disruption Podcast. We're activating big, bold change. Are you ready to disrupt?